So a big welcome to everyone, and thank you very much for joining today's session. We are very excited to have you here. My name is Giada, and I've worked in the language education sector for the past 7 years, and I'm now part of the Avallain team. Joining us today, we have an expert panel who will be sharing their insights on effective GenAI in language education. So we're starting with Nik Peachey. Nik is an award-winning educator, author, and edtech consultant with over 30 years of experience in language education. He specializes in integrating innovative technologies, including generative AI, to enhance learning and teaching outcomes. Then we have Carles Vidal. Carles is the Avallain Lab Business Director and is an educational technologist with more than 20 years of experience in educational publishing, specializing in creating e-learning solutions that empower educators and students in K-12 and other educational stages. And lastly, there's been a change on the panel, as unfortunately Mike Howard is sick at the moment, but we are happy to have Ian Johnstone instead. So Ian is Avallain Vice President, Partnership, and has worked for 25 years in digital leadership roles for ELT publishers and for edtech companies, and has founded numerous digital products and businesses for language learning. So we're looking forward to have an engaging discussion and valuable insights from their expertise. But before we begin, just a few quick notes. You probably noticed that the chat function has been disabled for this session, but don't worry, please feel free to use the Q&A tab, which you can find here below. And you can submit new questions throughout the session. And we'll aim to address as many questions as possible towards the end of the session. And also, please note that the webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be shared via email after the event next week. So with that, I think we can get started. And Carles, I'm very happy to pass this on to you.
Thank you, Giada, and thank you all for joining us today in our first webinar on effective GenAI in language education. In order to start the discussion, I'd like to take a moment to set the scene. Since the release of OpenAI GPT 3.5 in 2022, the edtech sector has been actively exploring ways to harness the potential of GenAI to create more personalized and localized educational content. Over the past 2 years, we've seen a wave of AI-driven tools emerge, each addressing different aspects of teaching and learning. Recent reports highlight the opportunities that GenAI tools bring, like boosting productivity, enhancing creativity, and improving content quality. But at the same time, they also raise important questions about ethics and safety that need to be addressed. These are all key areas that we want to explore today with our panelists. So with that in mind, let's start taking a look at the current landscape. And I will start with Nik. And Nik, could you tell us about the current state of GenAI tools for language teaching and what impact do you think they are having? Thank you so much.
That's quite an interesting question and quite a big one as well, because, in the space of time that we've started this webinar, there have probably been 10 more new AI language learning tools that have been pushed on the market. And I think sort of that's a bit like where we are at the moment. It's some kind of wild west out there with, lots of tools being pushed out all of the time. And I think to some extent teachers are being bombarded with these and sort of trying to work their way through them. And that's quite challenging. I think they are having a big effect and a big impact. And I think teachers are really, more than any technology before, I think teachers are willing to embrace AI quite very quickly. If you think compared to video conferencing like we're doing now, was around for about 15 years, and it took a pandemic for teachers to really adopt it and embrace it, and some still don't. And yet, with AI tools within the space of just a year, 2 years, teachers have really gotten into this and really found it really interesting. But like I say, I think lots of teachers are using them, but it's in a very sporadic way. Often they're not sure if they're using the right ones. They're not really sure if they should be using them, which ones they should be using them, how they should be using them. But, there's certainly a lot of enthusiasm there. And that's kind of being driven in two directions. I think, firstly, because they know that students are using them, and so there's sort of a lot of pressure there to keep up and understand what students are using. And I've just been talking to teacher trainers and teachers here in Tunisia for the last couple of days, and they say the students are bringing along things and showing to them. They're like, wow, that's great, let's use that kind of thing, which is really nice. And but yeah, there is a lot of confusion, and there is, I think, from the top side, there's a lot of worry about having 20 different tools that are being pushed into your classroom, or you've got 20 teachers and they're all using different ones, and that can be quite confusing, but and quite dangerous in a way. But I think there's a lot of enthusiasm there, and lots of teachers are using them and using them quite productively. And I've been hearing some really great ideas over the last few days as well. So that's really good, I think.
Thank you, Nik. And I think you raised a very important point in which we are in a moment in which maybe we lack the quality or the guidelines to be able to assess what are the relevant tools, what are the platforms that comply with educational expectations. And this is something we're going to draw on a little bit later in the discussion. But yeah, certainly that's kind of one of the characteristics of this moment in which we are right now. And coming to Ian, how do you think that the industry should ensure that GenAI tools, or how is the industry ensuring that GenAI tools support specific language teaching practices, for example, for improving learning personalization?
Well, thanks, Carlos. And I'm sorry I'm not Mike, by the way, everybody, but we wish him well in his recovery. Yeah, interesting question. I mean, I think there's so much potential, as Nik was just setting out, in generative AI. But as a technology provider, I'm very conscious, and the company I work with, Avallain, is very conscious that it's possible to overface with all of the possibilities that GenAI presents. And one thing we're very conscious of is that ChatGPT in itself, although it triggered the revolution that's happened in the last 2 years, is actually quite hard to grapple with for most teachers. Creating prompts that output a consistent, well-leveled, targeted output that they can immediately use in class is quite tricky. And even if you work it out yourself as one teacher, when you shift type of output you want to create, or the context you're creating it for, you still have to experiment with prompts to get exactly what you're looking for. And so I think one of the things that technology providers, the industry, has to do is provide tool sets that sit on top of ChatGPT and help teachers to find exactly what they want consistently, and at a high quality. And so there are a range of tool sets, as we've touched on already, that are emerging as reliable partners, sort of co-pilots to teachers in their endeavor to use GenAI more effectively. And there's one that we have been working on, which is called Teachermatic, which is a collection of generators, one per type of content that the teacher might want to create. And instead of the teacher having to come up with all the prompts that output the right content, you have a generator for lesson planning with all of the particular considerations for a lesson plan in the generator. The teacher just selects the particular type of output that they want at the particular CEFR level, and so on. and the generator does the hard lifting, the heavy lifting. And sitting behind that are a whole clutch of prompts that are sort of ready, trained, ready, researched. So the teacher isn't doing that. So that's a type of tool set that I think is of real help to teachers, and I think it's something the industry needs to do more in, these tool sets to sit above the large language models, the generative AI tools that are readily available. But that doesn't specifically answer the question, because it's not talking about language training. I mean, one thing that I think we can do using that kind of tool set is create content types that particularly encourage communication, encourage what is essential in language training, which is the production of language in the classroom. And we all know as teachers that it's difficult coming up with the next inspirational piece of material that's going to get the class communicating. And if you've got generators that can create class discussions and simulated dialogues and debates and presentations, all of which help to engage the class and get them communicating, I think that is a big step forward. And also making sure that material is really engaging, in that it's relevant to students. So if there's a particular topic that you've been covering in class, or that is in the news, or that is to do with a public holiday, or whatever it is, then using these tools, you can create something that really gets the class engaged. It might be a discussion about Taylor Swift, or it might be a discussion about something that's happened in politics of the day. We won't get too much into the politics of the day. And then I think that another thing that these tool sets can do is help teachers by being tailored to the methodologies that they're using in the classroom, whether that's the communicative approach, or teach, test, teach, or a task-based approach, whatever methodology that they're using. I think the tools need to, rather than just being ChatGPT, the tools need to speak to those methodologies that they're using in class. And all of these things are things that the industry has to engage with. And then once we've done that, a crucial step in everything that the technology industry is doing is piloting. A cycle of piloting, review, development, piloting, review, development. And I've been in the industry long enough, since 2000, that I saw this happening with the early stages of learning platforms and mobile learning and adaptive learning and all of these personalized learning. And what was crucial then is true now, that we need to do this endless piloting cycle, but it's probably never been such an important element as it is now, because things are moving so fast that we need the tools to adapt and refine based on real lived experience in the classroom. So piloting is crucial. And I mean, just with the Teachermatic product that I mentioned earlier, we've piloted it with the British Council, with International House, with Nile, with the Equals membership, with the English UK membership. It's important to just keep that cycle of review going. Sorry, that was a long answer.
No, but very, very relevant, Ian. And I wanted to kind of follow up on that, because I think I'm getting the sense in this stage that there is an openness to collaborate in the sector between governmental agencies, departments for education, international education institutions, sorry, and at the same time, educators, teachers in schools and colleges, and the industry at the same time. So I think in product management and in product development, it's always interesting to have this testing and piloting, as you were mentioning. But at this point, I think we are all living a moment in which there's a very open space, very horizontal, in which piloting is being carried out, as you were saying, and companies such as one you were mentioning as Teachermatic, are benefiting from from feedback coming from teachers, educators, pedagogists, etc.
Yeah.
So I think it's very, very interesting. And yeah, addressing and keeping on in the area of teaching practices and drawing on the recent report. Sorry, Nick, I didn't realize you had raised your hand.
Yeah, I just sort of wanted to follow up a bit on what Ian was saying, and sort of from the teacher's perspective, I think there is this sort of problem at the moment that teachers are reading a lot about the potential of AI and all these things that it can potentially do, and and a lot of the time they're thinking, yeah, but how do you do it? And I think that's where they're struggling to sort of try and prompt things, and there's no real structure to understanding how to prompt things for them. So I think this is something that can be really helpful, having these generators that are properly prompted, and the prompting has been done for them, so that you can go to the tool and pick which one and choose, okay, yeah, that's what I want to do. I can press a button and it can do it for me, rather than I have to, spend the next half an hour experimenting with different prompts and having a conversation with it, and then sort of maybe not really even getting what I want. So I think that is a big advantage. Yeah.
It is. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that, Nick. I wanted to comment with you, and that you could share with us one of the teaching practices that you were sharing in a recent report published by Oriel Square, in which you were in which you were saying that you have been using GenAI as partner for creative writing and co-writing with your students. Can you tell us a little bit more how did you go about this, and what do you think are the educational benefits of these kind of practices?
Yeah, I think the educational benefits are huge, and I think it's important in terms of I spent a lot of time actually working out the prompts to make these things happen. And so for example, one of the problems, or one of the issues that teachers are having with generative AI and with things like ChatGPT is that they see students going there, telling it to do something for them, and then they just print it up and hand it in as their homework. And there's no real kind of cognitive engagement there. The students aren't really learning anything. They're focusing on output rather than process. And really learning comes through the process. So I think particularly for learners, working with AI as a collaborator, so that it kind of walks them through different processes and helps them, is a much more productive way in terms of student use for them to engage with it. So what I did was I wrote some scripts that would, for example, get students role playing with an AI bot. So they could just put in the script, and then the bot becomes the waiter in a restaurant, and they become the customer, and they can have this kind of fluent interaction with it. Other things, for example, I designed a prompt so that students could design a plot for a story, put the plot in, and then the AI would co-write it with the students. So they would take it in turns to write paragraphs. So the AI is giving them some sort of input in terms of creativity and structuring some of the text for them, and then they're having to do some of it themselves. And then they can ask the chatbot for feedback on how well they've done, and get feedback on some of the soft skills, if it's a role play, or some of the accuracy, if it's, for example, a co-writing prompt. And I think that's, for me, that's a good way to move forward. In that, for students at least, it's helping them sort of develop their cognitive processes rather than just doing stuff for them, which is important, I think.
Yeah, indeed, the example that you cite, it really engages the student. There is this shared agency between the student and as well as with the bot, and one pushes the other in a way. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a very, very interesting exploration.
Yeah, it becomes much more of a sort of personalized learning experience as well, because you can give the same prompt to all your students, and yet all of them, depending on how they interact with the bot, have a unique experience which is geared to their level. And So they're all doing different things according to their level and interests as well. So that's nice too.
Indeed, indeed. And Ian, more in that line, can you tell us, according to your experience, other activities or teaching practices that you are aware of that teachers and educators are using GenAI with?
Yeah, thanks, Carlos. Yeah, I think my experience comes largely around these sort of tool sets like Teachermatic for providing teachers with generators that create the types of material that they need for the classroom, and really they're being used in circumstances where teachers are either short of time. We know that teachers are always short of time, and sometimes usually because they're short of time, they're short of inspiration. Sometimes, that they just need a trigger, a starting point for an interesting direction to take your lesson, and it might be that the course material that they're using as the basis, the course book, is a great course book, but it's just diverged slightly from where the class is, either in ability or in mindset, or there might be a thriving discussion that the teacher wants to tap into, and having the time and the inspiration to do that is often tricky. So I think these kinds of generative AI tool sets that enable teachers to create materials, yes, standard materials like quizzes and worksheets and model answers are great, and they are a great starting point, but there's all sorts of other types of content that these tool sets can create, and they're helpful in that sense as well, because teachers may not think about creating a dialogue or an exercise that uses a particular type of content within a text, or adapting a text to a given level and then using that as the basis for the class. And they may not think of it just because it normally would have taken them too much time to prepare. And so there are all these types of content that in a dashboard of generators you can access, and they're there for you to immediately use as a basis. Things like debates, I just noted a couple down here, debates and project ideas, setting up differing opinions so that you can get a real debate going in class. All of these things are available as starting points through generative AI tool sets. So there's those kinds of things that spring to mind. There's also the different formats of content that you can create with generative AI. Things like you can create PowerPoints so that you've got a basis for the lesson, an engaging basis for the lesson. And if you haven't tried using some of these tool sets for creation of presentations, it would be good to give it a go, because they're getting very good at it. So a good PowerPoint as a basis for the lesson, things like flashcards, so materials that you can use within the class to really get things started. And then you can combine materials as well. So it's not just creating one set, one output. You could, for instance, use a Wikipedia article. You could put it in to adapt it to a level, a generator that adapts it to a given CEFR level, and that becomes your resource for the lesson. That equally could be a section of a website or other material that is in the news. And then you can use that as the basis of a lesson plan in advance to give you some ideas about how to use it. You can then use it as a basis of a worksheet. You could use it as the basis of a quiz or a debate. So there's all sorts of things that you can do by stringing content generators together. And the generators help you in that process by suggesting both the format of output that you might want and asking you the questions of what level would you like, what methodology would you like to teach you? Do you have students in the class that are dyslexic or have other learning needs? And it just gives you that extra prompt to help you be more creative for the class. So those are some ideas. Another thing that is happening more and more is tying these generators to the content of that publishers produce. So if publishers if you're teaching from a given course book, wouldn't it be great to also be able to tie the output to the given course that you are working with? So yes, you can do all the things that I've just said flexibly, but you could do it while referencing the syllabus of a course. And those are things that, because we work a lot with publishers, we're exploring as ways to tie the two together.
Thank you, Ian. You covered a lot of things. I think that there's a debate there also, or maybe something we can touch upon a bit later about the possibility of schools offering this space for in this case, language educational schools offering their teachers the possibility of exploring new tools of in a safe space, and especially these kind of tools that you were mentioning that have already that educational added value into their prompts and that are multimodal and that are aligned, for example, to the CFR level. Brings us to the next question, which may be one of the the $1 million question, as they say, and then I will put Nik on the spot here. So, Nik, now here it goes. So, how reliable do you think GenAI tools are when it comes to language leveling in generated content?
In generated content, I guess, it depends which tools you're referring to, but I think certainly it's got a lot better. I know that this was a big issue. Like I started teaching a course on ChatGPT 2 years ago, and getting the level right was a big issue, and ChatGPT wasn't really doing it well at that time, or at least we weren't able to do it well with the level of prompting that we had. But I think that it's come a long way since then, and things have really improved a lot. And I guess that's one of the things about AI and generative AI is that it does learn. So if you're constantly, if there are constantly people asking for things at a specific level of the Common European Framework of Reference, then, it learns from that. And it learns from the feedback that you get with it. So, and I think it's improved a vast amount. I know because I went through all of Teachermatic's different generators and sort of tried to sort through and evaluate the level. And I could see from that they were pretty accurate. And when I did that, I was cross-referencing them through about 2 or 3 different other tools to kind of check to see if everybody was coming up with similar results. I mean, I think. So yeah, I think they're pretty accurate, but there is always going to, I think there is always going to be room for error. If you put three sort of human examiners or 3 teachers down and ask together and ask them about the level of a text, you will come up with some sort of variation. And again, I think, defining things according to the Common European Framework of Reference is also quite challenging, because there's always a difference between speaking ability and reading ability and writing ability and listening ability. So there are variations. So it's very difficult to say, yeah, this is B2 exactly, or this is B1 exactly. But I think there's been huge improvement, and that's that's really helping a lot, to have that reliability there.
That's great to hear. Thank you for that assessment. And Ian, I don't know if you want to follow up on that.
Yeah, I was just going to wholeheartedly agree with everything that Nik just said, but also just give from a publisher's perspective, because my background is in publishing. I think there's always been a struggle to level effectively for the Common European Framework of Reference, but I think the tool sets are getting better and better. The large language models themselves, so ChatGPT, which is probably the best known. But what I think providers of technology for teachers should be doing is constantly reviewing the levels, the accuracy of the output, and using that pilot review develop process to get to hone and get better and better at addressing the levels. They should have a methodology, in other words. It's not a destination. There won't be a moment when we say this is a tool set that is now 100% accurate for CEFR leveling, partly because the large language models themselves are changing over time. So when you add prompts on top of those large language models, there's enough variation that you will occasionally end up with less accurate results. So there's got to be this methodology in place. So you want to look for providers who are openly expressing their readiness to work in that way, an onward methodology towards addressing CEFR levels and other leveling. So whether it's ACTFL for the US and so on.
Yeah, totally agree, Ian. And I think you also mentioned a very crucial aspect in the role of the teacher here when interacting with GenAI, with generated content, right? Which is that they are the responsible of generating of curating that content, giving it, considering if it's reliable or not, and then sharing it. And so this possible over-reliance is something that they almost always must be aware of, and they must keep the oversight and the control of the content that's generated. So I think that's part of the informing the methodology that you were commenting on. Yeah, well, let's move on. Let's move on to other areas of this discussion. Nik, also drawing on the same report that we were referencing earlier, there was a statistic that's kind of interesting where it says that 38% of the UK educators feel confident using AI in the classroom. So only 38%, despite a high understanding of general AI concepts. Now, in your opinion, how can we help building teachers' confidence in using GenAI tools?
Yeah, I think from there are a number of ways we can do that. I mean, one of the best ways is training. Always the more training teachers can get on these kinds of things, the better it is. One of the other perspectives is making sure that the tools we're using are like Ian says, there's rigor being put into making sure those are suitable for the language classroom, and they're doing the kinds of things that teachers need them to do. And there's also the kind of perspective of having sort of ethical guidelines and guidelines for teachers in how to choose the right ones as well, and how to choose wisely. And I think all of those three areas are areas that we're still probably in our infancy with. Certainly, I mean, training wise, it's something people are only beginning to sort of really think about and dig deeply into, and I think sort of the ethical guidelines. I mean, I'm here in Tunisia at the moment. I've been working with a whole bunch of teaching inspectors, teacher trainers yesterday for a couple of days, and they're sort of really digging deep into sort of what kind of guidelines they should have and how they should train their teachers. And but it's a prickly area within education because traditionally the people who train teachers are experts, but when your experts are still teaching themselves, it's hard to sort of make that drip down really as well. So having some sort of secure guidelines in place can really help as well.
Yeah, Nik, I totally agree, and I think we could add here, especially for those of our attendees who are in managerial positions in their institutions, the importance of being aware of these guidelines that are coming from governmental institutions, like the recent one from the Department for Education in the UK, or expectations for safe products in AI that just were released in January.
Yeah.
But there are many of them that are basically recommendations that are built upon general principles. But at the same time, these guidelines, it would be good that would be transferred into an internal document within the institution that is plausible, understandable for the team.
I mean, UNESCO as well have come up with some very good guidelines as well. But, like I say, like you're saying, they have to be taken and they have to be put into the context within which teachers are working. And that can change from country to country, what the priorities are and what the importance is. Yeah.
Totally. Now, let's move on to another complicated question this time for Ian. Ian, what do you think about teachers' concern of GenAI replacing them? This came out as one of the issues in the OS report that I'm referring to, and I would like to know your opinion if you think those concerns are valid.
Oof, it's a big one. But yes, I'll get straight into it. I was just going to follow up quickly on Nik's point and just say, I think another thing that technology providers need to be doing to help teachers in becoming confident with the use of these tools is doing things like identifying champions within organizations. So yes, carrying out training, but also spotting where there are teachers who have a natural comfort with these kinds of tool set and investing in them to act as champions. Even certifying individuals who have gone through a certain level of training, so that there are sort of pinpricks of light in all the darkness, because I think there's an awful lot of teachers who do not know where to turn. And I think it isn't just the providers who are absolutely committed to these technologies and are very excited by it. There are many champions out there. I mean, Teachermatic, for instance, I know we keep mentioning it, sorry, but Teachermatic, we know the statistics for Teachermatic, so it's a useful one, is used by 40,000 teachers. So among that community, there are now so many teachers who have become really accustomed to using the generators and know how to use them as a basis. Anyway, sorry, I was drifting from my very difficult question, which I will get to now, which is, will generative AI replace teachers? And the simple answer is no. And I'm glad to be able to answer that sort of so straightforwardly. But I'm 100% confident of this. And in fact, as I say, I'm a publisher, and a lot of the technology that Avallain creates is for publishers. And obviously, so we're working with content creators, authors, editors, and so on. And of course, in that industry, huge concern, huge anxiety about being replaced by generative AI. But even there, we don't see generative AI replacing people. We see their roles shifting. We see the way that they engage with content changing, and we see the output changing. So content itself changing. And maybe I'll get a chance to talk about that towards the end. But it's important to acknowledge that the anxiety is perfectly understandable. And I think, everybody, when such a disruptive technology comes along, needs to pause and assess. I do think it's going to be important for teachers to engage with it and actively learn how to use it so that they're not wrong-footed by it, so that they are ahead of their class, so that they are able to make best use of it. But I think teachers perform so many functions that are impossible for AI to perform. And one of them is leading learners in the classroom, providing that center point and that direction of travel, that motivation to learners. And AI is just not going to be able to do that. Neither, while you're on that journey, at pace with a class of learners? Can AI spot that such and such a learner is struggling with the piece of work, is not communicating, they may not be raising their hand like many others, but you can see the anxiety in them about a given topic. You can double down with that learner and make sure that they come along. There's the intuitive things that teachers do that aren't replaceable. So identifying and responding to those personal needs. And the thing that I think that the good news is that I think AI should provide teachers with more time and headroom to do what they do best, to be intuitive and invest in the learners that are perhaps falling behind, to be more creative, to help the class become more engaged. That's where I see AI performing a key function, not by replacing teachers, but by giving teachers the support that they've lacked to do their job even better than they already do. We know that teachers are inspirational in everything they do. It's just very hard to keep up, to do everything that they have to do with such limited time and often limited resources. And I think AI gives them that headroom. I think that's my answer. Yeah.
Thanks, Ian. And I see Nik wants to add something to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on that. I think Ian's absolutely right, and I think one of the key roles I think as a teacher is to give your students a sense of belief in themselves that they can do it, and to be. I've heard it described. There's a really good YouTube TED talk about it, about being the student's champion, and helping them believe in themselves, and cheerleading them along. And I think whereas you could get an AI chatbot that would do that, would you ever really believe that it was sincere? That you'd always know they'd been programmed to tell you you're doing great. I know when I've worked with ChatGPT a little bit, it does that a little bit. It can come across as very insincere and, wow, that's a great answer. And you think, no, it's not really that great. But, when you hear it from a teacher who really believes in you, that can really make a difference. And, I know from my own experience, early on that, I had a teacher who believed in me and that really changed my life. And that, I don't believe that impact could have been had by a chatbot or an AI or even an Android teacher. I don't think so.
Yeah, totally agree with it. I wanted to add something also related to these concerns that I think are perfectly valid, but I would like to also take it from another angle. I think that we shouldn't take it for granted that some products will try to go in that direction. And I also think that so it will be depending on the educational institution, the philosophy that they want to implement, and how they understand education, right? And in this way, I think that, for example, linking it to the need for AI literacy, if institutions are, acquire this knowledge in order to be able to critically assess the tools that they are adopting, then they will be in better position to stay on top, right? Sorry, Ian. Nik, you wanted to comment something.
Yeah, I mean, it's connected to that in a way, and I think that I think that's maybe where one of the worries comes from for teachers is that particularly from the edtech community, there are in the past there have been lots of educational technology companies that have come along without a great understanding of education and seen it as being a problem that needs to be solved. And often the way their idea of solving the problem is, let's make this more cost effective and cheaper. And everybody knows the simplest way to make education cheaper is to get rid of the teacher, because that's where the big cost is, And I think, that's what's brought about a lot of the failures in the past. And I think, to some extent, a good deal of mistrust from teachers about the educational technology community as well. So I think that's somewhere where really, building trust again is really important. Teachers are put at the heart of this.
Totally. This tendency to techno-solutionism. I fully agree with you. And I wanted to connect it, as I was saying, with the need of bringing AI literacy to the educational institutions, to the language educational schools as well, because this builds this culture in the decision-making stage managers, but also in the teachers themselves, in order to be able to critically assess the tools that they are using, and to be able to see if these tools are safe, are fair, are reliable, are secure. These are all recommendations that can be found in some of the guidelines that we were mentioning earlier, like the UNESCO ones or the EU ones, or the latest ones from the Department for Education. And so certainly the role of AI literacy there, is critical to maintaining, the educators on top and with the agency when using GenAI tools. Back to you then, Nik, again. Given your recent experience here in Tunisia, where you are right now, what do you think is the situation regarding these critical assessment of GenAI tools by the people and the stakeholders that you have met?
Yeah, I think particularly, I don't know if Tunisia is the best example, because they seem to be really engaged with this and really aware of it. And they're looking at all the different aspects, not just issues connected with safety, security, and security of students' information and their information and data. But there's also a kind of very strong awareness of bias here, and cultural bias particularly. And that's something that often comes over, especially, in the past, the ELT publishing of the past, has seen quite a strong sort of cultural bias towards sort of Western culture, English language speaking culture. And I think, that's something that they're very aware of. They don't want, things to be particularly biased. They want things to be able to, that they can regionalize and adapt to their own culture, and that are respectful of their own culture as well. So I think those things are quite important. And I think, lots of teachers, whenever I go and speak to teachers, one of the big things that comes up is bias. How do I know it's not bias? Is it bias? What can I do about it? Particularly with, things that generate images as well. And, there's certainly a lot of bias in image generation, I think. And I think one of the other big things that comes up is, who owns the material? There's this worry about, IP and copyright ownership when they produce something. Okay, I've produced this, but do I still own it? Does it go, or does the company own it? Can I use it? How can I use it? And I think that there's a kind of a good awareness of that, and those questions are coming up. But I mean, that in terms of those things, that's where a lot of teachers are. They're sort of at the stage where they have the questions, but they don't always have the answers or know how to find the answers, which is sort of problematic, I think.
Yeah, Nik, thank you. And I think you also went through one of the issues that I think it's very important that we cover here, which is this need for contextualization, and to be aware that large language models are not really transportable to all of the realities, educational realities across the world. And so a great deal of value will be added by those companies, those GenAI generators that are able to include that as part of their prompts when they are asking for, asking for or requiring data that can provide better contextualization, better localization in terms of the reality and the social reality of those schools that they are addressing to.
So a big thank you again, and hope you have a good evening or afternoon wherever you are.